without you. I'd have lots of blank airtime is what I'd have. All righty, so where were we? Oh, so let's just talk about that video real quick. I didn't see that coming. I'm gonna tell you, I'm usually pretty good at predicting the ends of the movies. I didn't see that whole thing coming, where he got the wrong score. I love that. I love it. And you know what? It's not the only example of that that exists, right? It's people who are told. It's why in child rearing, you should be really careful about what you say to your child, right? If you're always saying, negative things, even though you don't mean them, that's what they absorb, and they begin to behave the way you've decided. Instead of them being bad, they may just be behaving badly, right? There's a difference between describing your child as bad and describing your child's behavior as behaving badly, right? Those send two very different messages. And as adults, we're subject to those same kinds of influences. So be really careful about things you say, whether they're to somebody else or to yourself, because your thoughts are going to dictate your outcome. If you're nervous about your first appointment, use that. Use it. Right? My first chosen career was not real estate. My first chosen career was I went to school at NYU as an undergraduate drama major. I was going to slay Broadway, and then after 5 years on Broadway, move east and slay Hollywood. And yet frankly, I think I'm better off where I am, because I don't like California all that much. so I'm happier to be here with you all. And yet the point I was looking to make was what?
That's not where you started. So that's not where you started. You were
you
didn't started at NYU acting, but
man, I have no.
You were talking about a surprise
concept.
ending.
Yeah.
Surprise ending.
Yep, that is all true. That's exactly what I was saying, and I have absolutely no idea what my point was going to be.
And look where you are now, Rick.
Yeah, see that? Here's what I can tell you. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I am 112% confident of that. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Well, if I remember where I was going with that, I will circle back. I simply can't remember where I was going with it. It was a point about that video. All right. Well, so I don't remember. I'm sorry about that. I'm sure it was brilliant. I'm certain that if we talk long enough tonight, I'll remember it. I'll tell you that one last piece. People who operate at high levels, people who achieve at high levels, they typically have more than one coach. And when people call me and say, hey, what do you think about coaching? And what do you think about the cost of coaching? I add up for them the amount of money that I personally spend to coach not just myself, but my entire leadership team in all of my businesses. Because they all have coaches, and I get to pay for all that. And so I think it's about $10,000 a month that I pay to make sure that we all have an opportunity to have someone external to bounce things off of, to push forward on. Donna, you're a mastery coaching client. Give us 90 seconds on your experience as a mastery coaching client versus previous, because you jumped into this about a year ago or so, I think.
Exactly. And I had other coaches prior to that, but I like the mastery. So mastery coaching is through Keller Williams, and it's one-on-one. We do a half an hour every week. And then I have assignments and what have you for each session. And I have to report on my numbers in various ways and plan for the future and talk about ahas and what didn't work. But it is accountability. For me, it's accountability at the highest level. And it's also somebody who knows me, knows my business, and knows Keller Williams, and knows, the real estate market that we're in. And it's just, it's somebody who, when you're feeling down, kind of says, wipe your face and get back out there. Or when you're trying to figure out a problem, they've got a bunch of solutions. Or they can hook you up with somebody else and say, oh, you need to know so-and-so in this marketplace. It's just a sounding board. It's a attaboy. It's a, yeah, get over it. And then it's a dive deep. What do you see in your future? Let's make a plan to get there. What's most important to you? It's just, I wouldn't. And the reason why mastering is better than the other things that I was doing before I got to Keller Williams is they know the systems that we have in place here. So they can actually coach me to what is here and available to a Keller Williams agent. And that's really critically important.
Yeah, we're going to end up being coached to a model.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we're starting the models class tomorrow. It's 2 weeks, and my coach said, yeah, you're going to do it. Yeah, yes, it's free for mastery, oh, by the way, and you're going in. You're going to go do that. So, even other resources that I'm like, I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. The market's going crazy. Blah, 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 blah. She said, yeah, and yes, you're going to do it. So I am.
Cool beans.
And she's always right, damn her.
Yes, yes. It's the annoying thing about coaches. And what's interesting is that as a coach myself, I have coaching clients who are outside of our market center. I do not coach anybody inside of our market center. I meet with many of you one-on-one, but I don't coach for money inside of our market center, but I do coach for money outside of our market center. And what's fascinating about what Donna just said is they're always right. It has nothing to do with knowledge or smarts or anything like that. It's just that from a coach's perspective, we're just asking questions from the outside. You get to answer the question and recognize that you knew the answer all along. It only feels like the coach is as right as they seem to be. They're just kind of coaxing out of you what you already understood about yourself, your business, your fear, your challenge, your whatever. Again, courage is defined as having fear and feeling the fear, but then going ahead and doing it anyway. And I feel like as a coach, my job is to help people recognize the things that are holding them back, and then just encourage them to just take the steps forward anyway, right? Oh, I remember what I was going to say. I knew if I stalled long enough, I would remember. So my first chosen career was on the stage, and I can absolutely remember the idea of standing in the wings before the curtain would go up, and having that thought process of, man, this show has been running for months now. Why do I still have those butterflies? And what I've learned over time is that the nights where the butterflies didn't exist, where there wasn't that nervous energy, where there wasn't that ability to take some level of fear, because nerves is just a light version of fear, right? It's all the same emotion for all intents and purposes. You need to learn to use that, right? It's actually positive. People look at it as negative. The nights that those butterflies weren't in my stomach were the nights that I felt like the performance was flat, or the show, there were mistakes. It just wasn't a great show. Where those butterflies show up and the nerves that you get to use, that's when you go out there and you just get to, it's all that energy that all of a sudden shows up positively when you don't decide to make it negative. All righty. So let's dive into finishing up our listing consultation. Hey, quick question before we take another step forward. Is there anyone, well, let me ask this differently. How many of you are willing and able to be on Wednesday at 4 o'clock as well to finish up? Okay, so I think from the hands that I'm seeing, it looks like enough of you can do that. And if you cannot be, what I'll say is I will absolutely record it and it'll be on for Thursday because what we're not going to get to today is the anatomy of a seller transaction, and I want to make sure that you go through the anatomy of a seller transaction. It's an important piece. So we'll add one more class to our time together, and that will leave us enough time for me to finish that and make sure I get to tell you the cat story because it's probably my best seller story. So make sure that you don't let me end. I probably need about 15 minutes or so to tell that story. So we have to end at 5:45 so I can tell you the cat story, and then we can graduate. We'll pretend the cake is there because normally in in-person Ignites, we haul a big old cake in for the graduation. We'll send you virtual cake. How's that sound? All right, so when did we meet? Monday. No, today's Monday. On Wednesday of last week, we went through much of the listing consultation, right? We went through the needs analysis. We went through the market conditions questions, and then we went through the two macro conversations, the broker metrics script and the month supply of inventory script. Any questions or ahas you want to throw out there before we take the next step forward into the SPA and getting very specific about comparables? Let's put two ahas out from Friday's session. I know it was a long time ago. What do you remember about the needs analysis, about the questions, about the macro graphs that we went through?
They were a very effective and easy way to not only analyze the market, but make a point.
Yeah.
Very, very clear.
And they are that, aren't they, right? They're designed that way. They're simple and quick, right? And the good news is they're simple and quick for you, which means they're simple and quick for the sellers. My biggest piece of advice about those two graphs, for those of you who tend to get stuck in the details, be really cautious that you do not get stuck in the details on those graphs, right? They're fast and quick, 2 to 3 minute little blinks to set the stage for what comes next. You're not doing a deep dive. What else? One more aha, and then we will cruise forward. While you're thinking about that, I have to shut this window because it's pouring down rain. Excuse me a second.
Oh, not here yet.
And I mean pouring down rain. One last aha. Yeah, done.
Oh, let John go.
John.
No, it's just interesting to see the difference between like the macro and the micro. The micro shows sort of kind of gives you an idea of where in that particular area, particular town, or particular neighborhood where houses will be moving at a certain price point. So it sort of really keys in, a better understanding of, do you really want to get onto that? I believe it was the green or the red line, the selling or the contract lines, as opposed to the blue line. It really hits home a little bit harder on that, and everyone thinks their house is worth probably more than it is, but it's sort of a good indicator of what things are doing in the market.
Absolutely. And what's nice is it's a visual representation of where they want to be, right? The whole power of that broker metrics graph is the red lines are all big. We can close our eyes and throw a dart and hit the red lines. You need no skill and absolutely no time to get on the red line. All you have to do is put it on the market. However, the blue and the green lines, they literally visually represent a much smaller target. And so that's part of why we why we love that graph so much, because it helps them focus in on being really precise and getting it right. Go ahead, Donna.
So I just wanted to add, so the needs analysis, for me, it just was a turning point when I first saw you do, when you first taught this to me, because it just tells you, if you do it exactly the way we talked about, don't embellish it yet, just do it exactly the way it was laid out, you know exactly what you have to do to win this client. They tell you. You've asked the questions, you've let them unfold it, put all of it out there, then you know exactly what you have to do. If you just give them that and then actually live up to it, it's done.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because I will often ask, if someone called you up and said, do me a favor, if you could come to my house at 5:30, if you could wear red and bring a Tootsie Roll, if you will do those three things, I will sign the listing paperwork. Well, who wouldn't do those three things? Like, would you tempt fate and wear green just to see if they were kidding? No, of course. You do exactly those three things. And Don is 100% right. If you will do the needs analysis the way it's written and the way we demonstrated it, it's those three things. That's what they're telling you you need to do to win the business. And then you just have to do that, right? So it truly is that simple. Love that. All right. So the SPA, let's talk a little bit about the SPA. What's the difference between an SPA and a CMA? You've all heard the term CMA. What does the term CMA stand for?
Comparative market analysis.
A comparative market analysis. Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. And so we're going to teach you not a CMA, right? We're going to teach you an SPA. Now the SPA stands for what? You can cheat. It's written on the top of your page.
Strategic.
Positioning analysis.
I love it. Wow, that was
We're
spectacular.
working as a team here.
Telling you what, I love it. Right, a strategic positioning analysis. Strategic positioning analysis versus a comparative or comparable market analysis. So here's what I want to dispel. People think that the whole SPA thing is way different than the CMA thing. And the fun is, it really isn't. You're going to do all the same work and gather the same data. The main difference is in how historically the CMA has been discussed with a seller. We're going to do something very different with how with the presentation, if you will, of the SPA. Foundationally, however, before we get into anything additional, why on earth would we simply call it something different?
Differentiate yourself.
You got it. I love me that, Alicia. Right? The main reason we called it something different is because at every step of the way, again, you've heard me say this a lot, at every step of the way, we want to make sure that you look and sound different. And so if people are seeing more than one person and everyone trots in there and says, let me talk to you about the CMA. I did a great CMA. Let's haul out the CMA. Hey, let's review the CMA. And you walk in there and say, so what I'd like to do is actually work on a concept called the SPA, our strategic positioning analysis. Would that be okay? First of all, you're asking them, everyone else is telling them, and you're asking them about something that they've never heard before. And frankly, we called it strategic because what seller doesn't want to hear a strategy? It's not about the comps. See, I think that's the other thing that's flawed in that whole CMA thing, is that right in the title, it makes it about the comps. Well, we're going to utilize comps, but comps are just one piece of the puzzle. It's why our strategy, our strategic positioning analysis is not a strategic pricing analysis, because a price is a specific number based on some facts. Positioning comes into play when you maybe have to adjust that number up and down based on what's currently going on in the market. A comparable or comparative market analysis doesn't really take into consideration current competition. And the strategic positioning analysis, because we have a focus on positioning instead of pricing, does absolutely take into consideration the competition. We're going to show you how in a second. Do you see how important taking into consideration current competition actually is to help a seller create success? If we're only ever looking in the rearview mirror, how does that help solve an issue today? Right? We've got to look in the rearview mirror for a foundation and then look out the front view mirror to see where we're actually going. Right? Positioning is more of an art. Pricing is more science. And what I'm asking you to trust me on is that the conversation with your sellers isn't about science. It's about art. It's about positioning. And I say that because sometimes I hear agents get so stuck on being right about the numbers that it prevents them from having an actual dialogue. It prevents them from asking more questions. It prevents them from objection handling based on motivation that they've uncovered from a seller, right? All those different things, because they've done the work. I did the math, and the math says 579. Well, let me ask you this. What's the real difference between 579, 585, 569? What's the real difference between those numbers in a market that is moving as quickly as ours? The answer is nothing. For all intents and purposes, the answer is nothing. And so I don't want you to get stuck on, I did the math and here's the right answer, and if the seller doesn't give me the right answer, I have to make decisions about moving on or arguing, because that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about helping the seller see that there is strategy in this whole positioning conversation when we give them a foundation and then layer on top of that what's currently going on. For example, the foundation may say that 599 is the right number to put this house on the market for. However, current competition may say, wow, there's not a whole lot on the market, and yet everybody who seems to be on the market is between 595 and 599. Like, we've got more competition in that small little range. And so the foundation numbers say, yes, 599, go for it. The positioning conversation, the strategic conversation around where to position the property has everything to do with, hey, if that's the number, what else do you notice in that range right now? Well, it's kind of crowded. Yes, I would agree. I'm curious, can you think of another number that's pretty close to where you are that might get you out of the crowded area? Well, I don't know, maybe 589. Love that. Because now you're pricing ahead of your competitors. If the price really should be 599, you'll create competition, which now means multiple offers, which means you have an opportunity to get where the market said you were going to go anyway, right? Because the market always corrects any mistakes that are made. Do you see where we're going with this? All right. So here's what I'd like to do. I would like to kind of read through this SPA script with you, then go back and kind of talk it through one more time, and then read it, then have somebody else read it again, right? And maybe what we'll do that last time is kind of model with somebody playing a seller what this sounds like and what it looks like. Now, you will have questions, I'm certain, because most of you, for those of you who weren't trained differently on this call, most of you have a thought either based on your experience with real estate agents before or the thought about what this actually looks like, that I'm supposed to do the homework, walk in, show them my work, and then spit out a number. And we're going to show you a process that has absolutely very little to do with that. You're actually doing something similar without ever getting to the here's my number. And let me give you a bit of background. We developed this from a time period a little more than 10 years ago when the market shifted out from under us, right? 2007, 2008, the market went sideways. By 2009, 2010, we were in a bit of a struggle. Sellers still hadn't figured out that anything had happened. Realtors couldn't figure out why they couldn't sell any houses. Buyers came in and said, we have all the power. It was kind of a mess. It was kind of a mess. And what was happening was we had listing agents going out on listing appointments and delivering their number. And what was happening is sellers were just taking a rubber stamp and stamping that number on the agent's forehead, figuratively now, play with me, right? Stamping the number on that agent's forehead, seeing 2 or 3 agents, and then lining those agents up like in a lineup at the end, again, figuratively, jostling them around based on who had the higher numbers on their forehead, and don't, guess I was the winner because I had the highest number on my forehead. Now, because I came in with the highest number and my other 2 colleagues didn't, I was the winner. Did I deserve to be the winner? Sometimes yes and sometimes no. And what we found was that people were not hiring us based on any kind of actual conversation around skill or anything more than I had the highest number. And so what agents learned really quickly is, hey, you want a new listing? Doesn't matter if it sells or not, because we get our sign up and we get calls and we can turn that into other business even if they don't sell. So we'll just give the highest number possible. And we ran into over and over and over again, our agents who were going out and telling the truth and having consultations were losing to agents who weren't telling the truth, or who were telling the truth and then adding $50,000, or telling the truth and then adding $30,000, and having conversations as if that was okay and would create an opportunity to make more money. And if you know anything about those I call them the dark ages, right? From 2008 to 2012, nothing was further from the truth. I mean, we were doing everything we could possibly do to attract a buyer to a property, and praying for an offer, and then saying things to sellers like, okay, you got an offer. What is there to think about? Just say yes. Oh, well, we thought we'd counter. No, we're not doing that. But thank you for your thought, right? Because for a while there, selling a house was really tough. All right, so let's run through this. So we start off by finishing up our last little bit, right? And somebody just needs to unmute and answer my quick questions on the as a seller. You don't have to go crazy. Just throw me some answers so that we can move through this and so it makes sense. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do you have any other questions on the economics and market conditions data that we just discussed? That would be your cue. Well, there we go. Thank you, David. No?
No.
Excellent. So if it's all right with you, let's move to a more specific version of this discussion and really focus in on how all of this affects you and your home. You know, in order to be successful and obtain the result that you're looking for, I would like us to spend a little time examining the market through the eyes of both the buyer and the bank's appraiser. How does that sound to you?
That sounds reasonable.
Excellent. First, let's take a look at the best 3 sold properties. The best 3, it helps if I actually read the script, sorry about that. Let's take a look at the best 3 comparable properties to yours that have sold in Wilton in the past 3 months. I'm curious, David, have you seen any of these houses personally?
No.
Excellent. And would you take a moment and just review each of these comparable homes? Again, I want you to look at them through a buyer's eyes. And I
Now,
give
what do
David
you mean
some.
by buyer's eyes?
What I mean is would you agree that that buyers and sellers see the home slightly differently?
Yeah, buyers want to knock it down, sellers want to pump it up.
Exactly right. And so what I'm asking you to do is look at this utilizing those buyers' eyes, because the buyers are who we're looking to attract. And I'll explain in just a moment as we continue this process exactly where I'm going with this.
Okay, great.
So I give David a little time to look at them. Now, David, if you had to buy one of these properties today, which one would it be?
The middle one.
The middle one. Excellent. And why did you choose that one? I'm just curious.
Has the highest price on it.
So as a buyer, you would choose the one with the higher price?
Well, because it best fits my needs.
Ah, okay, I got it. So it best fits your needs. It also just happens to have the higher price on it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Got it. And so knowing how important your needs are to your purchase as a buyer, does it make sense to you that you would choose that one because for you and for your needs, it represented the best value on the table?
Yes.
Excellent. Now let me ask one more question, David. Would you agree that this property is basically comparable to your home?
Basically, yes.
Excellent. I want you to all to add the word basically in there because that word basically is really important. So having established that, let's do this, David. Here is a list of all of the current competition in this range. As a reminder, the main data point from the market conditions information we discussed earlier was the word precise. Do you remember that?
Yes.
So when you combine that, the idea of being precise, with the comparable sold sales data that you just reviewed, where do you feel you should position your property to outperform any and all of these other properties for sale? Now, again, what I'm showing David is a list of about $100,000 price range that bookends up and down the comparables that we showed him. So if the comps were 550, 560, and 570, I'm showing him $525,000 to $600,000 in an active range. Right? And so David, just pick something reasonable because I want to just get through the bottom of it and then we'll go back and pick this apart.
570.
Excellent. And so that number you are comfortable with?
Well, I'd always like it to be higher, but based on what you're showing me here, it makes sense. It should be 570.
Couldn't agree more. So if it's all right with you, we're going to write that number 570 right here into the listing agreement. And all that's left for you to do now is sign the document.
Awesome.
Right? And he goes ahead and does that. Right? And I validate it by saying, I think you made a really great decision. I think that's an awesome choice in terms of where you're positioning your property, and we move forward from there. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you think that it's ever as easy as what I just outlined with David?
No.
So here's what's fun, is that this process allows it to be that easy. Now, is it always that easy? No, of course not. Do all of those answers to all of those questions always please everybody? Do you have people who want to go higher, who want to go lower, who want to have a longer conversation? Of course you do. However, the question I asked is, do you think it's ever that easy? And the answer to that question is yes. Experience tells me that it is oftentimes that simple, because you're not complicating the whole conversation with all this other data. And I will tell you that for those of you who are kind of data driven, you're going to have to pull things back a little bit. For those of you who are lighter on the data side of things, this process will speak really clearly to you. For those of you who like Excel and tons of spreadsheets and let's spend 45 minutes having a conversation about every single graph, this process is going to demand of you some practice, because you will have to, and I'm one of those people, just PS, right? I had to practice being less like, let me give you 47 different reasons why these numbers make sense. And turn it over, because what we're really doing is we're turning over the process to the seller, right? We are guiding the seller through a learning process about the market. Remember I said on our first date together, on our first date, our first day together, I'm clearly very lonely. So on our first day together, the idea of your job description to interpret current conditions such that the client can make the best decision possible. This is just another example of when that shows up. You're not there to talk to them about how much their house is worth. You're there to help them understand and interpret all of the current data that gives them the tools that they need to make a decision about where to place their property on the market based on their needs, right? Because if I'm sitting talking to Donna and she's in that mindset of, I don't have to be a seller, it can be whenever, her choice is going to be very different than if I'm talking to the same Donna whose motivation is different. You know what, I'm moving to Austin because these grandchildren who I never thought were arriving are actually now arriving, and my daughter-in-law needs my help because they're having triplets, and she can't possibly take care of triplets all by herself, so I'm moving down there to go and take care of my grandchildren. And oh, by the way, she's due in less than 30 days, right? I mean, all of a sudden motivation takes over and changes people's timeline. Yes?
Oh, Rick, could I just add something
Of course.
that supports this? Because when I first learned how to do the CMAs, we did similar, but you did sold, some actives, pendings, etc. But then you always came out with a number or a range. And what you find yourself in is like, okay, now I have to defend that. And as you said, there's really no way to defend it. So you're sitting there, well, this has a pool, this one doesn't, and you just go crazy. This just keeps it nice and simple. And you don't have to get into all that other stuff to try and defend a number that is not probably accurate anyway, is my
opinion. You know what, Alicia, I so appreciate you saying that, because you're 100% correct. And the idea, Alicia used a really important word. She used the word defend, right? Experience says that the second a number comes out of your mouth, you are now being asked, either verbally or non-verbally, to defend that number. And as Alicia said, at some point, this is a subjective decision that has to be made based on someone's motivation. The foundation is objective and fact-driven, and at some point the seller has to make a choice subjectively to say, where am I going to position my property? Again, that's all based on their motivation and their understanding and interpretation of the facts. And so at some level, what this does is it eliminates that whole let me defend my position perspective. Thank you so much for putting that on the table, Alicia, because it's so right, right? And here's what's fascinating about it. The reason that agents oftentimes get uptight and tense about listing consultations or listing appointments is because they think their job is to somehow defend a number that the seller's not interested in, to make them to make them understand how right that number is. And if you remember when we first started this conversation tonight, I said, look, there is no right or wrong per se, right? There's effective and ineffective. There are some numbers that will be effective in getting you what you say you desire, which is an offer and a sold sign on your property. There are other numbers that are far less effective. There are some numbers that will be effective in the time frame that you've outlined you'd like it to be, and there are other numbers that are far less effective in that same time frame. So do you see how there's not really a right or wrong answer to it? It depends on the person you're sitting educating about the market and what motivation is driving them forward. Let me make a point to you. I at one time, a long time ago, I hired an assistant who had a bunch of connections, and part of the reason she was such a great hire was because she came from real estate and had all these connections, and one of her connections was a builder and the builder's wife in Bethel, and I took a listing of one of their properties on Eden Hill Road in Newtown. I took it over from somebody else. And I thought, well, look at me. I'm taking it over from somebody else. Again, it was early enough in my career. I told you the story of those first couple of listings that I took over from all those Coldwell Banker agents. And as a matter of fact, I took this over from a Coldwell Banker agent as well. I think at some point in my early career, there was a hit out on me by the local Coldwell Banker offices because I just kept taking inventory away from their agents. And so I took this listing for $949,000. I was the second agent in. I had the listing for 9 months. I was the only person, when I give you the rest of the history, who was able to actually secure a price reduction, and I reduced the price to $899. They then didn't renew the listing with me, which horrified me at first because it was the first time anyone had ever said no. Like, you're out of time, sorry you didn't get the job done. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So it went from me to somebody else. And then it went from that person to somebody else. 7 times. They ended up with 7 different real estate agents. I was number 2. 7 agents over the course of 3.5 years on the market. After the price reduction that I obtained from $949 to $899, it never changed price again. 3.5 years later, it sold. And after it sold and was closed, I had my assistant reach out and just kind of touch base. I guess I was a glutton for punishment. I thought, well, I didn't sell that one, but let's just touch base and say, hey, we saw Eden Hill close. Congratulations, great job. And she got a very interesting piece of information back. Her task was to call and just schmooze, right? Say congratulations. We're sorry it didn't work out when we were on the job, and yet we're so thrilled to see that it closed. Blah, 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 blah. And the builder's wife said to my assistant, here's what we learned in 3.5 years. We learned not to listen to you people, one of my favorite phrases, right? You people, you realtors, at all. Because see, we were right all along. $899 was in fact the number. And frankly, we probably should have left it at $949, except you, Rick, convinced us to reduce it to $899. And like my assistant was like, are you high? What is wrong with you? She didn't say that. That was all the internal talk, right? And she just said, you know, it was so great to hear your voice. Thank you so much for your time. Again, congratulations. Bye-bye. And she came back to me and said, you know what? It was painful to have this person as a client. She said to me, would you mind if I deleted them from our database forever? Because of anyone and everyone that either one of us has ever sold a house to, we just don't want to be in business with crazy. And it was the first time in my career I said, yeah, yes, please delete forever for good, right? Her perception of what had occurred was that she was right. It took 3.5 years for the market to catch up to her. And as Bogdan made a point of saying in the chat box, it cost them thousands and thousands of dollars to carry that new construction property. Because I don't know what you know about new construction loans, but at some point, I think you get a year to sell the property or something like that. And then after that, it converts. It's not a new construction loan anymore. They convert the loan, and now you have to start paying interest and paying principal. You have to start making payments because you didn't sell the house. So they had all the carrying costs, all the insurances, the heat, and the oh my goodness me. But she got to be right, right? So recognize that sellers do exist that are going to be right at all costs. The good news for you is you always get to make a choice, right? For me, my tolerance was about 10%. I think I told you this before, right? My tolerance was about 10%. If someone wanted to go 10% higher and the market itself was moving in such a way, I would tell them flat out. We'd have a conversation around why that number they were choosing may be less effective for them achieving their goals. And if it was within my tolerances and I was honest about what my thoughts were, we would go ahead and be in business together with an agreement that after 2 weeks, and to be completely transparent, I used to use 21 to 30 days. Today, I will teach you 14 days, right? Because what I wish I did differently, looking back, was tighten that time period up. And yet when I was having these conversations, I would give them 21 to 30 days to have the market prove them right. Notice what I just said. I want the market to prove them right. And that was all part of the conversation. You know, look, Donna, I hope to goodness I'm incorrect. I would love to be incorrect. So let's do this. Let's give you 14 to 21 days for the market to simply prove you right. And then if for some reason that doesn't occur, here's the fallback. And then I push them right back into this conversation because I'm not picking the fallback number. They're going to pick the fallback number. They already know it because they know what the right answer is. They just don't like the right answer and want something higher. So now we have these two numbers that we'll move forward with and perhaps even prearrange to have the price reduce at that 3-week mark, right, with their signature on it. And yet let's get there. Let's go back to the top of the SPA and run through it one more time, line by line, so that you understand what's going on. Again, we're talking to them about a more specific version of the discussion to really focus in on how it affects them in their home. Tell me why it's so crazy important that we actually say to them, look at this through the eyes of a buyer and a bank's appraiser. Why is it crazy important we say that?
That's the market perspective, not your perspective or the seller's perspective.
Exactly right. Because there are two people's opinion that really matter the least in this whole process. And it's yours and the seller's. And nobody likes to hear that, right? A lot of sellers like to think that their opinion matters in this whole conversation. and yet it doesn't really. And a lot of agents get upset hearing that their opinion doesn't matter. Right? Remember that whole I can get you more conversation we had last week? Well, that's where that fits in. Because it's not about what I can get you. It's about what I can prove. It's like had I not gone to Broadway, which I didn't make, by the way. I got to off Broadway. I did one off Broadway show at the David Letterman Theater. It was the most horrible show you ever wanted to actually pay good money for. I felt guilty that we were taking foreign tourists' money, because those are the only people who showed up, people who didn't speak much English, because the show we were doing, you didn't need to speak much English for it to not make any sense. So at any rate, it was not Cats. It was across the street from Cats. It was not Cats, however, right? It probably made about as much sense as Cats, and yet at least there was Andrew Lloyd Webber to give Cats some kind of whatever. And Betty Buckley singing Memory. We didn't have Betty Buckley, and we certainly didn't have Memory. So at any rate, my point being, keep getting pulled away by these stories of days gone by. Had I not decided to pursue that, I would have gone to law school. And the idea of being a lawyer, remember, it's not about what anybody thinks. It's not about how it seems. It's about what you can prove. And so that concept comes to play here, right? What can we prove? What is it? What foundational objective data do we have to make some foundational decisions that we're layering subjective on top of? The other way doesn't work. You can't make a decision subjectively and then try to jam the objective, jam the facts into what you think you want, right? And I see sellers making that mistake. And the more important information to make sure you hear tonight is I see agents still making that mistake. I see agents making the mistake of feeling like it should be worth more, or feeling like if I tell them it's worth more, maybe they'll want me better, right? I want you to be hired based on skill, not based on deception, right? Not based on an opinion. Because when you're hired based on your skill in helping interpret data to help them make a good decision, you then don't have to then show up 2 weeks later when it hasn't sold and no one's come to the table and defend it. Instead, you get to have a conversation around what we think the next best thing to do is. And that has nothing to do with you, because you didn't pick the number. They did. And it's a far less contentious relationship that you build. You build a partnership. You don't build well, I hired this one and he told me this, and see, he was wrong. It didn't sell. Well, so now you're telling me I have to reduce it by $20,000? What's to say that you're going to be right this time? Why don't you just market more? Why don't you just put more advertising out there? Why don't you make more phone calls? Why don't you? And you're put in this position of, how am I defending this decision that I made? Instead of being able to sit down and simply say, so, Lisa, as I said, we were going to touch base every 14 to 21 days. Thank you so much for this ability to meet. So here's what's occurred in the last 21 days. And I'm curious, based on all that activity, how many offers have we received? Lisa, just play with me a little bit.
None that I know. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, none. And so I'm curious, what does that say to you about the market's reaction to where you've positioned the property?
Well, maybe it's a little higher than it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. And so would it be okay if we kind of dove back into the data a little bit to see what adjustment you think might need to be made so that more eyeballs are more attracted to the positioning that you choose?
I think that'd be a great idea.
Great. And then we dive back in and do the same, have the same conversation, right? But that's a very different conversation because I'm asking her questions about choices that she made. That's a very different conversation than being called onto the carpet to say, why hasn't this sold? Trust me, I spent years defending that. Years of my career as a listing agent before I switched to a different process.
Can I just point something else, Rick, in what you just did right there?
Oui, madame.
So also, by saying, okay, why don't we just dive back into the data, you're also not making them wrong, which is so important. You can't make that number that they made you use, you can't make it about them and them being wrong. It's just like, okay, so that's passed. So let's go back to the data and let's see what we can do that'll make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Really great point. Really great point. Because I think if you remember, one of the things I said on Friday is the second you make the seller wrong, you have lost, right? And that happens even after you've signed the listing agreement, to Donna's point, right? It's not about making them wrong. It's about building a partnership to say, how are we going to solve this issue together? That's the conversation, right? And if you do that right from the beginning, Lisa doesn't have these expectations that I'm going to have a meeting with her and tell her how to rescue the property or defend the number that she chose or even grill her about the number she chose. It's just, I asked her a question. What do you think that tells you about the market's response or reaction to the number that was chosen, the positioning of the house? And she gets to make, now she could very well say, well, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I don't think you've had enough open houses. Right? And I'll help you objection handle that in a second.
Yeah, but there's also, just like this environment is so crazy, people are just getting ridiculous. It's not about, it's okay if you're having a conversation with somebody who's logical and who's listening and who really wants to be, who wants to hear something. When you're talking with people who don't have the right listening skills and they're just being ridiculous, right? Even if you ask the most grounded question and you show them the information, if they just want to be ridiculous and stay in that place, then it doesn't matter.
Oh, boring.
Well, I would half agree and half disagree with that. Simply because and again, if you give me a second to get there, I'm going to ask somebody to be like not necessarily a jerky client, but someone who is far less agreeable than what everyone else has been, and help you kind of objection handle through that. I agree, Anne, that there are some people who are just not hearing it. I get it, right? And I'll help you objection handle that as well. And yet the reason I said I only half agree with that is experience tells me that with the right questions and the right process, you help some of those irrational, crazy, I don't want to hear it people see things differently, right? And that's why it's so important to maintain the fact that to understand that your role is as an educator. It's not to convince someone to do something they don't want to do. It's to utilize their information about their motivation to be a seller or a buyer, works either way, right? To help them make better decisions. And I'll give you some strategies and some scripts that help through that conversation. Because one of the things that I got really good at in my listing career was to help people step forward with truth based on what they saw, even though they didn't agree with it. To separate those two things out. If you look only at the data, what's the path you would choose? Again, not holding you to anything. Let's go down that path, and then let's go down the path of what it is you want or need. And let's just agree to disagree. Let's just agree that those two things can be different, and agree to disagree, that you can use one in place of the other and get the same result, right? So again, let me get there, and I'll help you work through that. And someone can be the seller who gives me a hard time.
Rick, can I just, don't you think right now, I mean, I've reached out to you on a number of crazy situations. I think right now our job more than anything is to remain the only sane person in the transaction. I found myself in that place more than I want to be since March.
Yes.
People are out of their minds for all kinds of reasons. And
Yeah.
right now, our major job is to just remain calm and sane.
Yeah. Yeah. And utilize phrases that I've given you in the past, like, I understand. Right? I understand. Like what you're saying in your head is, I understand that you're a lunatic. However, right? But that you stop right after the second word. I understand. You can do the rest in your head. I understand. And remember, business success does not come from a place of, if they were different, I'd be better. Right? You can't live there. You have to live in that spot of, how do I be better to affect a different result? What skills do I need to learn to be better at this conversation? What other questions could I ask? Right? Diana Kokoska teaches us that in order to get to better, you have to first go through different. Right? And so it can't be the same. You have to be willing and flexible enough to kind of step back from all that and say, okay, how different do I have to be? Because look, you can't change people. People are who people are. You have to be able to change you to affect a different outcome with somebody else. I will tell you, it drives my children crazy, because what I just said to you, I have done my absolute best over the last 10 years to at least get some level of mastery around. I don't know that I can say that I have mastered that skill, but I have done everything I can do to attempt to climb towards mastery of always recognizing that my DNA is on something as well. It's not just somebody else's. So how do I take it back on myself and say, how can I be better in this scenario? What could I have done differently? What do I need to learn from this scenario? And my kids as teenagers would oftentimes come home and want to just, like do the blame throw up thing, right? I didn't pass this test. Well, okay. And before you could even say anything about passing, well, it's because the teacher was absent and the teaching assistant didn't do the right thing. And the person behind me was talking and I didn't have this. And I got up late and you made me go, it was like everybody's fault but theirs. And so the conversation would always be, okay, so do you see that you are currently living in that space of, if everyone around you was different, you would have done better on the test? I'm curious, how could you have just simply done better on the test and not make it about everybody else, right? They hate that question. And yet it's a victim versus accountability conversation, isn't it? Right? And I will tell you that for a while, as my son was a sophomore and junior and senior in high school, what I started to notice is that victim mentality started to creep into his world. And it would always be everybody else's fault. When he didn't swim well, right? It was somebody else. This pool has a lot of waves, or we didn't practice that in practice the other day, and I didn't make the practices. And so I recognized that by the time he was halfway through his junior year, without addressing that with him, he could create habits that would last the rest of his life about always blaming other people and being a victim. So we sat down and we had like lots of conversation around how to take responsibility for you, right? How do you always look inward instead of looking outward? That's this conversation, right? You cannot change other people. You can change you to be better and more efficient and more effective to hopefully create a different result when you deliver something different. So let's get back into our script, and then I'll cycle back, and I promise I'll do some objection handling with you. You then up to the 3 best sold comps, right? How many? 3. Please note, if you take nothing away from our time together today, 3 is not 5. 3 is also not 7. It's not 8. And it's not 1. 3 is 3. And so why do I say something as ridiculous as that?
You don't want to give them too much information, and you don't want to give them too little information.
Bingo. Bingo. And what I find is that many real estate agents still to this day err on the side of way too much info. And here's what I've learned. It confuses 2 people. Which 2 people does it confuse?
You and the buyer or the seller.
Exactly right. It confuses the agent and it confuses the buyer, right? So limit it to 3. There are 3 best sold comps. I literally just had this conversation about a week and a half ago where someone said, I'm struggling, can you help me? And I said, certainly. And they put down 5 different properties in front of me. And I said, well, what am I looking at? And they said, well, these are the 5 best sold comps. I said, okay, well, which were the 3 best sold comps? And they said, well, I don't know, I really struggle with that because these 3 make the best sense, but this one, which is priced higher, has some things that I think the seller should see. And this one, which is priced way lower, also has a couple of things that might kind of make sense. I go, okay, so what if you took the high one and the low one and decided that the best 3 were the ones in the middle? Well, but are we sure we're giving them the best data then? Yes, because they're the best 3 sold comps. And those numbers were all in a spot that when you looked at them, if you asked a question, okay, based on these 3 comparable homes, what's the approximate value of your house? It's not hard, right? I say we're not giving them numbers, but we're actually giving them all the numbers that they need. Right? If the 3 comparable homes to yours sold at 560, 570, and 578, do you not now have a pretty clear idea about the value of your home? Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. And then we can layer subjective on top of that. Maybe the market's moving swiftly, so we can pad it a little bit. Maybe you have to be out in 30 days, so we should cut it short a little bit. Right? Strategy comes in on top of that. The subjective and the strategy comes in on top of the foundational numbers. So it's 3. Why else do we use only 3? Who else uses only 3 to make a determination?
The banks and the appraisers, I think.
Exactly right. The appraisers, right? Appraisers use the best 3 sold comps. So why wouldn't we use the best 3 sold comps? Why do we ask if they've seen any of the houses? You guessed it, just in case they actually have seen any of the houses, right? I one time had a guy say to me, I said, have you seen any of these houses? And he said, yes, that one. I said, oh, great. Was that in an open house? Or he said, no, it's my brother-in-law's house. We have Thanksgiving there every year. Oh, well, I'm certainly glad I asked that question, because guess who had never been inside of that house? Me. And so without asking that question, if I just decided to talk about this house, what a fool I would have looked like when he came back to me and said, well, yeah, half of what you just said is not all that true. Really? Well, how do you know that? Well, because it's my brother-in-law's house. Oh, So I learned to start asking that question right up front. I want to know how much the seller knows, right? And so had David said, yes, that one is my brother-in-law's house, excellent. You know what? You've probably been there more than I have. You can probably give me more information than I can bring to the table on that one. Give credit where credit is due. That's okay. And then we ask them to review the properties, right? What we're getting at with the review is 2 things. We want them to understand how comparable they actually are. Now, again, not everybody always agrees, and I'll give you some objection handlers for that as well. Not everybody always agrees, which is why we add that word basically in there. Do you agree that these are basically comparable to your home? Because sometimes when you say, are they comparable to your home, the answers you get are, well, no, you know, I have an extra half bath. Well, that is correct. And yet every other statistic is pretty much dead on, but we have to now talk about a half bath. And remember, we're not appraisers. We don't give an extra $3,000 for a half bath and take away $10,000 for a bay of a garage that we don't have. That's what an appraiser does, is all those pluses and minuses. We stay within the basic confines of, here's a basically comparable home to yours that sold, without all the pluses and minuses per se. And so what we're attempting to have the seller do is put themselves in the buyer's shoes, right? We want them to see their own property with a buyer's eyes, and then stand in the buyer's shoes and choose one of the three comparables. And regardless of which one they choose, because you're bringing the best three sold comps, any of the three is the right choice then, right? Because the idea of them choosing that property demonstrates for them how a buyer will choose their property. That's kind of the point you're looking to make. If you remember, I asked David the question, based on the things that are important to you, it sounds to me, right? Because the first time he said he chose the middle one, and I said, talk to me about why you chose that one. He said, because the number was the highest, right? Yeah, I've dealt with smart alecky sellers like you before, right? And so yes, the number is the highest. So now we have to probe a little bit more, because that's not, first of all, that's not really why David chose that, right? He really chose it if he was doing if he was working through this process with me, because it was more appealing to him, or it had more of his needs, or what. And so when I pressed him on it, he said, well, it had more of the things I needed. So I needed to then pivot on that to make sure he recognized that the reason he chose that is because for him and for his needs, it presented the best value. Even if it was the highest price, the other two at lower prices didn't necessarily meet his needs. And so the value that middle property brought to him was, it met all of my needs, even though it was a slightly higher number. That's still value, right? Do you all know the definition of value? All right, you should write this down, because it's an important conversation. The definition of value is more for the same, or the same for less. More for the same, or the same for less. Meaning, more for the same means if each of these three properties is priced the exact same, I think I'm more attracted. The value is in the one that offers me more, right? So maybe they're all three priced the same, but this one has a third bay of a garage, and I'm a car collector, so I need that extra third bay. Well, now that presents more value for the same. Or the same for less, which means now I've got three properties that offer me pretty much the exact same stuff, but for some reason this one's priced $10,000 lower. So value is either more for the same or the same for less. And in this conversation I'm having with David as a seller, I'm just looking to get him to recognize the fact that buyers, just like he just did, choose properties based on where they see the most value. That doesn't mean they choose the cheapest property, which David modeled for us. He chose the most expensive property, but it was still because it showed him the most value in our false scenario there. Does that make sense to everybody? And then once they choose it, you're flipping right over into, is this one basically comparable to your home? Because again, they've just demonstrated how a buyer chooses a house to purchase over other houses. They just demonstrated it for you because you asked them to. And that gets important later on if you have to objection handle. So they demonstrate that. Then you ask if the house is basically, the property is basically comparable to theirs, and then move forward with the list of actives. Yeah, so I'm telling the story on Wednesday. I'm not telling it tonight. And if you will be, it's okay. You're all good. So does that make sense in terms of building a through line with this SPA? What happens if the best 3 comps have a wide range in prices? Great question. I would argue that you maybe don't have the 3 best comps, or I would argue that in certain scenarios, and this doesn't happen terribly often, but in certain scenarios with maybe specialty housing or things like that, you may only have really 2 solid good comps. That does happen every once in a long while. And with the way the market is moving right now, it's very unlikely to me that you can't find 3 valid comps that tell the right story, because we have inventory closing left and right and left, right? So sometimes it's a matter of you gotta look a little harder. What happens if David had said to me, no, I don't think this is comparable at all? Does that happen? Yeah, absolutely it does. For right or for wrong. And again, you know the inventory, you've walked through the seller's property, you know they're comparable, at least in the way that we need them to be comparable to make these decisions. Sellers will sometimes challenge that. What they're already telling you is that they're not challenging the comparability between between the properties. They're challenging the number, the sold number that they see on the comp. That's what they're challenging. There's nothing to do with the house, really. They just don't like that 570 number. And so they feel like if they say, yes, it's comparable, well, then they've already said, well, now I'm done. There goes my 625 list price. Right? Because they've already said, yes, that these are comparable. So if it's comparable at 570, how are we going to 625? So here's what I want you to understand. There are simple objection handlers through that conversation. And they start by not hiding or running away from the challenge. If David had said to me, no, I don't think it is comparable at all. Got it. I'm curious, David, could you point out the differences between your home and this particular property that we're looking at as a comp? And then David would need to produce some evidence of why he believes they're not terribly comparable. And what I have found is that when you challenge the challenge, because again, you've done your work, right? You know they're comparable. You know what the differences are. David now has to dive in and kind of do some work. Well, I think mine looks better. Understood. And could you, just based on the data, if we were looking at things that really drive a buyer to say yes or no, kind of statistically, would you agree that they're both colonials? Well, yes. Would you agree that they both have 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths? Yes. Would you agree that they both have similar square footage? Well, yes. But my kitchen is better. Understood. Can you talk to me about why exactly you think that your kitchen is worth more than this particular property? I'm asking questions to kind of get to the bottom of why that looks that way. I'm not disagreeing with him per se. I just want to know why he thinks that. And at the end of that conversation, I'm going to move forward in the script anyway. So David will tell me all the reasons he thinks that this is maybe not such a great comp. I might even ask him. So based on the fact that the kitchens are a little bit different, what do you think the differential in terms of what a buyer is willing to pay might be between this particular property and yours? I'm not afraid to ask him what he's thinking. Frankly, I prefer to know what he's thinking because it helps me help him make a better choice moving forward. If he's got stuck in his mind that his kitchen is worth $100,000 more than this other property, and I don't know that, well then I'm trying to work within $25,000 here because that's what I'm thinking. We need to be on the same page. So I want him to do a brain dump. I'm going to keep asking, what else, what else, what else? And then, so if they say I put in an $80,000 kitchen, the conversation becomes, I understand, I'm curious, when did you do that? Because if they put in a kitchen last week versus 4 years ago, it's a different conversation, right? And so I put it in a year ago. Excellent. I'm curious, when you put in that new kitchen, did you put that kitchen in with the intention of recouping all of the costs of that kitchen when you sold the property? Or did you put that kitchen in because you really wanted a new kitchen? Well, a little bit of both. And so I'm curious, have you enjoyed your new kitchen in this past year? Yeah. Because would it surprise you to know that cost doesn't necessarily equate to price? First of all, it's a year old, right? And so we already have some depreciation to consider. Second of all, understand that your tastes for a brand new kitchen may not be everybody's tastes for a brand new kitchen. And so do you see how your choices may shrink the buyer pool a little bit? I'm not 100% sure I would say that now now it's come out of my mouth. We got way too into the weeds of the comparables, because if we were actually doing a role play, I would have moved on from this by now. And what I mean by that is, at some point, I get to simply nod my head and say, understood. I understand that you believe this is not a great comp for your particular property. Here's a list of actives. And we just move forward, right? We move forward. Don't get stuck in the weeds. I did that on purpose. I wanted to show you what getting stuck in the weeds looked like. That's not true. That's not true. And yet, that is what getting stuck in the weeds looks like. And do you see how there's really no way out of it? You get stuck in the weeds and it turns into that defensive conversation that Alicia was talking about. It turns into you didn't choose the right granite, right? It's a no-win scenario. So I'm glad I screwed that up.
Hey, Rick,
Yes, sir.
how do you objection handle when they say, well, that's all nice and fine. You say it's worth 575. I see how you got there, but I owe 650.
Got it. So if in fact you had owed 650, I would have uncovered that before we even had our appointment, right? Because one of the questions I'm going to ask to qualify is, how much do you owe on your mortgage? And are you current on your mortgage? Because those are important qualification questions to make sure you don't have a short sale on your hand, right? So we wouldn't have gotten to this point without me knowing that. However, just for grins and giggles, let's say that I didn't know that until just now. And at that moment in time, you say, well, so I owe 650. Ah, got it. I'm curious, have you spoken to someone about selling the property short? I'm curious, are you current on your mortgage? I'm curious, have you discussed with the bank their definition of hardship? I'm curious, like we need to put a full stop on this conversation because we may be going down a slightly different path if you're looking to sell the property short. The first thing I might ask is, understood, I'm curious, do you have the difference in cash to bring to the table to get this closed? Right? Because that's the first thing. People think, oh, it has to be a short sale. Well, no, it doesn't. One of the solutions to short sale is bring the money to the table. Do you have $75,000 to get this closed?
So what happens if I want to, I'm hell bent on listing it for 650?
Yeah, so a 575 house for 650, I may decide to allow you to hire somebody else for me, right? And again, we're going to go through that. We're going to go through the conversation. So you're going to pick a spot that's not on my sheet, 650, and I'm going to ask you that. So with that choice, David, what specific evidence exists that supports that choice?
Well, the reason I called you is because it's a hot market right now. I thought I might be able to get out from under this house.
Yeah, and you may. I'm still curious what specific evidence based on the data that we reviewed would support that number, because regardless of the market, we still need to support the number.
Oh, I saw a house 5 miles away that sold for this price.
Got it. And yet it didn't show up in this data this evening. Is that correct?
Correct.
Got it. And
Why
so
didn't you bring it?
yeah, so what that tells me is that it likely isn't one of the best 3 sold comps. If you know the address, I'd be happy to look it up for you and we could review it together. Right, so we may be able to just kind of grab that house, and that does happen, right? All of a sudden you look it up and show them the data. Let's go through this together. Oh, so you have a 3-bedroom, 2 full bath ranch, 2,200 square feet, and this particular property is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 3,600 square foot colonial on the other side of town, right? And so I'm curious, do you see maybe why we don't have that as one of the best 3 sold comps to your particular property? Again, I'm going to just keep asking questions. I'm not going to get flustered. I'm not going to get defensive. Right? Sometimes sellers want to fluster you. Sometimes that's their MO. That's okay. That's okay. Again, I'm looking to build a partnership. And sometimes sellers can be really aggressive at the listing table, asking lots of spitfire questions, demanding this, demanding that. Stick to your process, right? One of my favorite things to say was, you know what, that is an excellent question. I'm going to jot that down right here. And did you have any others? Oh yes, that one. Okay, I'm going to jot that down here as well. And as soon as we finish this process, because I find the process oftentimes answers most clients' questions, as soon as we finish the process, if it's okay, I will circle back to those specific questions. And I'm going to help keep that seller on track with this process, because what I just said is true. I find that the process itself simplifies and answers most questions that someone would have, right? And so we just keep kind of objection handling through that choice of a number. I'll give you a couple of quick tips. For me, I don't ever say a number that I don't support. So if in this conversation, David said, I think 650, I wouldn't say, understood, what specific evidence exists that would support 650. Because the second I say that number, I have now validated it. So I won't say a number. To me, it's like a game. Until I support the number, it won't come from my lips. I'll say that number, I'll say your choice, and reference it that way. And as we continue to maneuver the number or not, that's when we find out exactly whether or not we're a match, right? My goal is not to go and list every single property that I go on an appointment for. My goal is to consult every single seller to make the best decisions that they can possibly make on the listing of their home. And if that doesn't include me, I'm okay with that, right? Because I'm not attached to the result. I'm attached to the process. I'm attached to my role as your consultant. Would I like to take the listing? Of course. And yet for me, a 575 house at 650, yeah, I'm not sure that that's in the cards for me, right? Because the market isn't moving that swiftly. The market isn't necessarily giving us in that price range that kind of percentage over asking. It's just not. I'd rather have a conversation around strategy versus competition versus negotiation, right? Are you aware of the difference? When you position a property for competition, competition is what you bring. When you position a property for negotiation, negotiation is what you bring. Which do you think is better for your bottom line? Oh, competition? Great. Based on the data that we've just reviewed, where do you think the best position the best place to position your property would be to create a level of competition, which means people fighting for your house, right? So you see, we're continuing to circle back around, circle back around, circle back around. And if in fact David was absolutely hell-bent on that 650 number, and I chose not to go into business with him in that moment, the script is simply this. So it seems to me, David, after kind of much go around, it seems as though you are looking to position the property outside of what the market may really bring to the table for us. And because I don't want to let you down later, I think I may have to turn you down tonight. Because the last thing that I would like is for us to create a contentious relationship. So as partners, I'd love instead for us to part as friends. It has really been a pleasure to meet you and your wife. Everyone's lovely. Your house is lovely. I wish you the absolute best of luck. Because here's where I'll end tonight. That's also called the takeaway close. Because what I have found in my career is that if I've made it that far, guess what? People want to hire me. And when I now turn around and decide not to go into business with them, it creates a want. And I've received things like, well, what do you mean? So, well, you know, again, this has been lovely. It sounds like we just maybe need to agree to disagree on the path forward that will actually cause the result that you're looking for. And I completely support you and your decisions. They're just outside of the realm of decisions that I think I'm going to make for myself. And I start packing up my briefcase. I've taken a bunch of listings by packing. Because if you've done everything else really well up until then, they want to hire you. It's not about the number. It's about the skill and the confidence and the level of comfort that you bring to the table. When it's all about the number, anyone will do. I want to be hired based on my merits, based on my skill, based on my ability to look somebody in the eyeballs and say, you and I may just have to agree to disagree, and it's okay. It's okay. I understand the position you're in. I get it. I get it, and I respect it. If in fact putting it on the market at that number doesn't work out for you, call me. Because I also have an expertise in selling properties that didn't sell the first time around. All right, guys, 6:05. So on Wednesday, 4 to 6, we're going to start right on time. I'm not going to tell you any stories. I'm not going to ask you any questions. I'm not going to ask for ahas. We're going to dive right in. We're going to do a little bit of objection handling around price. I'm going to bring to the table a pricing strategy sheet that you can use to help objection handle as well. Answer any questions you have on the listing consultation and pricing. And then we're going to zoom through the anatomy of a seller transaction, all in 1 hour and 45 minutes, so that I can make sure I have time to tell you my cat house story.
Do we have the anatomy of a seller paperwork?
You don't. You will have that tomorrow.
Okay.
All righty? Hasta la vista, babies.
Thanks, Rick.
Sure thing. See ya.
Thank you.